Hey everyone, What If Fan here, bringing you another exciting part of What If Transmigrated in Bleach World. You can find the fanfic title and the original author's name on my Patreon page. Make sure to check it out and show them some love. If you enjoy the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Quick update. What if Dragon Deck user in Yu-Gi-Oh! Zexal and What If Reborn as a Goku clone will be going on hold soon, since we've nearly caught up with the author. So now, I need your help picking the next project for the channel. I'm currently deciding between these three fanfics. What if Gacha system in Modern Family World? What if Fusion Deck user in a different Yu-Gi-Oh! GX? What if Transmigrated in One Piece and becoming a Marine? Please vote in the poll and let me know which story you'd like to see next. I'll take the top 2 picks and start working on those 2 series next. Also check out my Patreon channel for early releases of all the series, where you can find all the series released one day ahead of YouTube. Alright, let's jump into it. Chapter 21, Ayasunanao wants to become stronger. Kayaraka Shunsui, faced with an attack on his dignity, reacted immediately, giving 3 firm denials in a row. No, I didn't. Stop talking nonsense. The most elegant lady sitting beside him quickly stepped in, soothing Kayaraku with gentle words while throwing a sharp glare at the geisha girls who couldn't suppress their giggles. Uehara Shiroa grinned and, with a casual wave of his hand, gestured toward the sake. Alright, no more denying it. Just drink, brother Kayaraku. As soon as he sat down, several beautiful women immediately surrounded him, enthusiastically pouring him wine and tea. Kayaraka Shunsui sighed in defeat, but after a few rounds of drinks, his mood lightened. For a brief moment, the familiar joyful atmosphere returned. Later that night, when the festivities had died down, Uehara Shiroa, now in a sage-like state of sobriety, noticed Kayarako sitting alone, deep in thought. There were no women around him this time. Curious, Uehara Shiroa approached and, with a swift flick of his fingers, cast a kekai, spirit barrier, around them to block out eavesdroppers. What's on your mind? He asked casually. Kayaraku exhaled slowly, his eyes hidden beneath the shadow of his bamboo hat. You still think the culprit behind the hollow incident isn't who we assumed? Uehara Shiroa narrowed his eyes. Do you have any leads? Kayaraku hesitated before replying, there's a suspect, but it's unlikely. That person is still imprisoned. He trailed off, then gave Uehara Shiroa a look. Just keep this between us. Don't tell anyone else. Uehara Shiroa nodded. He understood. Both Kayarako's Kaiten Kayakatsu and Hirako Shinji's Sakanade were illusion-type Sanpakuto, making them extremely sensitive to the presence of Kyoka Suigetsu. Back then, Shinji had realized something was off when Sakanade became unusually active. That's when he first suspected Aizen. But unlike Shinji, Kayaraku's gut feeling alone wasn't enough. He had no concrete proof, so he couldn't make a move. And he knew Aizen was a master of deception. Uehara Shiroa smirked. I get it. He also knew that Aizen would eventually dispel Kayaraku's suspicions through sheer charisma and clever misdirection. And when the Tokonada incident occurred, Kayaraku would end up shifting his focus toward Tsunayoshiro Tokonada. Now that was a name Uehara Shiroa barely cared about, the trash noble of the Tsunayoshiro family. However, he was somewhat intrigued by the Tsunayoshiro family's heirloom artifact, Enreiki Oten. As the night deepened, Uehara Shiroa raised his sake cup and downed it in one smooth motion. The liquid burned as it slid down his throat, but it had an indescribable aftertaste, one that lingered and grew richer with time. A bottle of this level of premium sake was worth a fortune. Ordinary citizens couldn't afford it. In fact, if a regular soul tried drinking it, they might literally burn up from the inside. Only high-ranking officials in the Gotei 13 could enjoy such luxury. Watching Uehara Shiroa drink so calmly, Kayaraku chuckled beneath his hat. Hey, brother Shiroa, any more thoughts? Uehara Shiroa immediately caught the deeper meaning behind his words. No thanks, he replied lazily. I can't stand nobles, but when the time comes, I'll help if needed. It seems like this fragile piece is nearing its end. Kayarako swirled the sake in his cup and sighed. Yeah. It may seem peaceful on the surface, but underneath, the Seriitii has never been at rest. Don't worry, he added, raising his glass. The old man and I will protect you. Cheers. Uehara Shiroa scoffed, clinking his cup against Kayarako's. I'll be thankful if you don't cheat me first. The next day, Uehara Shiroa wisely stayed inside the 1st Division's barracks, avoiding any unnecessary excursions. No doubt Suifeng had deployed the entire Onmitsukido to keep an eye on me. For now, it was best to lay low. Besides, his daily training tasks could easily be completed in the squad's training grounds. Half a day later, Okikiba Genshiro stood frozen in front of the 1st Division headquarters, veins bulging on his forehead as he stared at the abstract artwork covering the walls. Uehara Shiroa, you're way too free, aren't you? Standing beside him, Vice Captain Sasakaibe Chojiro, who had silver hair and a distinguished mustache, simply smiled. This painting has high artistic value, he mused. Okikiba shot him a look. How high? Can it match my rising blood pressure, Sasakaibe Chojiro? Sasakaibe stroked his mustache and admired the artwork thoughtfully. Look at this majestic horse, white and black, tall and powerful, with 2 horns. What do you think it represents? Okikiba's eye twitched. It means, that's a cow. Meanwhile, as Uehara Shiroa strolled through the 1st Division dormitory, he heard a commotion. Hey! Vice Captain Chojiro and 3rd Seat Genshiro are fighting. Come watch. Uehara Shiroa shook his head. With such a chaotic management system and unreliable leadership, how does the Seriitii even function? Just as he was about to walk away, a powerful yet aged voice echoed behind him. Uehara Shiroa. His body stiffened instantly. Turning around, he found himself face to face with a shining bald head and a wooden cane planted firmly against the ground. There stood the Commander General of the Gotei 13, Yamamoto Genryosei Shigakuni. The strongest pure soul reaper. Faced with the big boss himself, Uehara Shiroa dared not slack off. Captain Commander, sir. He straightened up, forcing a serious expression. Yamamoto's ancient yet commanding voice rang out. After thorough inspection, do you find the 1st Division's barracks to be secure? Uehara Shiroa cleared his throat. Yes, sir. I can confirm that the barracks are completely safe, with no hidden threats whatsoever. Yamamoto's eyes remained closed as he tapped his cane against the floor. No. You are the hidden threat. Uehara Shiroa froze. Leave the barracks and go somewhere else. Return at night, Yamamoto ordered. Uehara Shiroa was dumbfounded. Did I just get kicked out of my own squad's headquarters? Captain Commander, I deeply care about the 1st Division, please don't chase me out. Yamamoto didn't even flinch. Out. Now. With no other choice, Uehara Shiroa let out a long sigh. He turned on his heel and, with a swift shunpa, vanished. The moment he left, several figures clad in black discreetly followed him. But after a short while, Uehara Shiroa arrived at the largest bookstore in Seriitii. He smirked. They probably expected me to head to the Red Light District or 8th Division, but they never would have guessed that I'm actually an intellectual who loves reading. With a leisurely stride, he entered the bookstore. To his surprise, inside, he spotted a familiar figure, Ayasunano. But something was different. Unlike her usual composed self, she seemed distracted, flipping through a book absent-mindedly. Uehara Shiroa raised an eyebrow. Interesting. First Kayaraku looks exhausted, and now Nanao looks troubled. Truly like uncle, like niece. He approached her and casually asked, Little Nanao, what's on your mind? Nanao looked up, her expression unreadable. After a pause, she adjusted her glasses and said, Shiroa-kun, can you teach me Kido? Uehara Shiroa blinked. He knew about Nanio's future potential. Right now, she was just a young officer who had graduated from the Shino Academy 2.5 years ago. But in the future, she would develop Kido barriers strong enough to trap even Jugram Hashwolf. Therefore, Ayasunano was able to secure the position of vice captain of the 8th Division just by relying on Kido, and it was definitely not just a matter of connections. Looking at her determined gaze, Uehara Shiroha smirked. "Your talent in Kido is impressive," he admitted. "But what's making you so impatient all of a sudden?" Chapter 22, Teaching the Glasses Girl Ayase Nanao. I want to become stronger. I want to contribute to the 8th Division. Ayase Nanao declared firmly, her gaze unwavering. Though Kayaraka Shunsui never openly acknowledged their blood relationship, she knew deep down that he was her only family in this world. For years, he had silently protected her, offering guidance and care. Now, she wanted to repay that kindness not as a burden, but as a true vice-captain in her own right. At that moment, Uehara Shiroha received a system notification. Ding! Congratulations to the host for triggering a special mission, helping the poor and needy, aiding the girl. Helping the poor and needy, aiding the girl. Since the host cannot bear to see beautiful girls struggling, a special mission has been issued to help Ayase Nanao master Vice-Captain level Kido within 3 months. Reward, a random ability or item. Uehara Shiroha blinked. Again? This girl is a magnet for special tasks. First Kayaraku, and now Ayase Nanao, she seemed to be triggering missions left and right. Was this what people called the legendary Little Red Hand? A mischievous thought flashed through his mind. If I wasn't afraid of getting beaten to death, I'd ask Kayaraku, how much for the girl with glasses? Ayase Nanao, noticing his intense stare, instinctively shrank back. However, deep down, she felt an unexpected sense of happiness. Uehara Shiroha quickly composed himself, flashing a reassuring smile. Brother Kayaraku and I are good friends, he said smoothly. Since you're his niece, that makes you my little sister. So your business is my business. Nanao blinked, struggling to follow his logic. But in the end, she nodded gratefully. Thank you, Shiroha-kun. Though she had never seen Uehara Shiroha fight, she had long heard of his genius. And if her uncle respected him, then surely he had to be powerful. Come with me. Uehara Shiroha said, his expression turning serious. Since this was a special mission, he wouldn't take it lightly. The two arrived at the 8th Division's barracks. Even before stepping inside, Uehara Shiroha's keen senses detected several barely perceptible presences. They were skilled at hiding, clearly members of the Onmitsukido. Tisk, Suifeng really has me under surveillance, huh? Still, he paid them no mind. Teaching Ayase Nanao came first. Everything else could wait. They reached the 8th Division's Kido training grounds, where Uehara Shiroha turned to face her. His usual playfulness faded, replaced by an expression of pure seriousness. If you think I'm going to teach you high-level spells like Hado number 99 right away, he said, then I'm afraid you're going to be disappointed. Nanao stiffened, a flicker of disappointment in her eyes. But before she could protest, Uehara Shiroha continued, his voice calm but firm. I'm only going to teach you the basics. Because the Ayase Nanao standing before him was not yet the composed and mature vice-captain of the future. Right now, she was still a youthful, inexperienced girl, full of potential but lacking the necessary foundation. No matter how eager she was, throwing advanced Kido at her would only hinder her growth rather than help it. The numbered Kido spells, from Hado number 1 to Hado number 99, were just a fraction of the true Kido inheritance. They had become the orthodox school of Kido because they were the most stable and had the best cost-to-performance ratio. However, Kido beyond level 90 was on par with Bankai in power, but with severe drawbacks. They took longer to chant, consumed massive amounts of spiritual pressure, and could backfire catastrophically if mishandled. Only Kido masters could reliably use them in battle. For someone like Nanao, jumping into high-level Kido would do more harm than good. I understand, she murmured, though her voice was tinged with disappointment. Uehara Shiroha sighed. Given that this was a special mission, he decided to explain further. In Kido, higher numbers don't always mean better. Nanao looked at him, startled. For example, he continued, if you truly master a simple Hado number 4, Byakurai, White Lightning, it can kill an enemy instantly. But if you lack skill, then even Hado number 99 is just a fancy firework. Nanao's eyes widened slightly. You need to understand, Uehara Shiroa pressed, that Kido from levels 1 to 99 are just the beginning, not the end. The true pinnacle of Kido isn't about learning high-level spells, it's about developing your own techniques based on your attributes and strengths. This is what we call magic is shaped by the caster's heart. And that is why Uehara Shiroha smiled. It's better to master one path than to dabble in everything. Nanao whispered his words under her breath, absorbing their meaning. Magic is shaped by the caster's heart. Better to specialize and master than to spread oneself thin. She felt her mind expanding, as if she had gained sudden insight. And just like that, her initial disappointment vanished. A simple sentence, but it completely changed my perspective. For the first time, she truly admired Uehara Shiroha. She focused entirely on his lesson. When the class began, Uehara Shiroha didn't talk about advanced or even intermediate Kido. Instead, he focused solely on fundamentals. At first, Nanao's disappointment returned. Basic Kido? I already learned this long ago. But soon, her eyes widened in shock. W8, is this really basic Kido? The concepts he explained, she had never even heard of them before. And worse, she didn't even understand them at first. That realization shook her to the core. Uehara Shiroha's teachings revealed the gaps in her knowledge. What set Uehara Shiroha apart from others was his foundation. His Shuunpa had skyrocketed to captain class after fighting Yoruchi, not just because of her teachings, but because of his accumulated knowledge and training. His shadow clone training, his self-study, his deep understanding of fundamentals. All of it built an indestructible foundation. Even a genius like Aizen would be shocked by how thorough Uehara Shiroha's fundamentals were. And now, Nanao was witnessing that firsthand. At first, she thought he was just showing off, acting knowledgeable about Kido. After all, he was only covering things she had learned long ago. Or so she thought. Because soon, she realized she had been wrong. She hadn't mastered those fundamentals. She had only scratched the surface. Everything Uehara Shiroha explained felt like a new world opening up before her. How can there be such a huge gap when it's the same Kido, the same theory? She was stunned. Uehara Shiroha's basic knowledge contained secret techniques passed down only in great noble families, combined with his own unique understanding. How did he even learn these things? Simple. Because to Uehara Shiroha, can the knowledge of scholars be called stealing? If Aizen could learn it, why couldn't he? Chapter 23, Beyond the Limits of Rules. Inside the 8th Division's captain's office, Kayaraka Shunsui leaned lazily against the window, a gentle smile playing on his lips as he observed the two figures in the training grounds below. His niece, Ayase Nanao, sat with unwavering focus, meticulously taking notes as she absorbed every word. From time to time, Uehara Shiroha would pause his lecture and personally demonstrate a technique, allowing Nanao to follow his movements. It was a seamless exchange between teacher and student, their progress swift and steady. At first, Kayaraku had been a little worried. Talent didn't always equate to being a good teacher. Sometimes, when a person was too skilled, they struggled to explain things to those who lacked the same innate ability. But soon, Kayaraku realized his concerns were unfounded. Uehara Shiroha's teaching was not only precise and methodical, but also incredibly sharp. Each time he spotted a flaw in Nanao's foundation, he pointed it out immediately, breaking it down into simple and digestible concepts. Even Kayaraku himself could recognize these weak points, but he couldn't have explained them as clearly as Uehara did. This kid's something else. Kayaraku thought to himself, watching with mild amusement. After finishing another training session, Ayase Nanao and Uehara Shiroha returned to the 8th Division's inner hall. Nanao, now brimming with newfound knowledge, carefully prepared a steaming cup of tea and respectfully presented it to Uehara Shiroha with both hands. "Teacher Shiroha," she said, her voice filled with genuine admiration, "your mastery of Kido is truly..." She trailed off. Despite her extensive vocabulary, she couldn't find the right words to properly describe how incredible his Kido techniques were. Her current expression and posture, pure reverence, resembled that of a devoted disciple before their revered master. Uehara Shiroa smirked, amused by the sight. That's because you have good talent, he said smoothly, accepting the tea. It's my luck to have a student like you. Having a cute, intelligent girl admiring him and serving him tea. This was far more enjoyable than scheming in the shadows of the Soul Society. No wonder Aizen first puaed Hinamori Momo before recruiting 2 lowly subordinates in Hueco Mundo. That guy really knew how to cultivate loyalty. Uehara Shiroa suddenly had a ridiculous thought. At this rate, I might follow the same path, questioning Aizen, understanding Aizen, and becoming Aizen. As if sensing his change in mood, Nanao took her admiration a step further. To show her gratitude for his guidance, she gently massaged his shoulders, carefully pressed his temples, and even kneaded his arms, doing her best to repay her teacher's kindness in every way she knew. To her, this was simply what a devoted disciple should do. This special mission was an absolute steal, Uehara Shiroa mused, feeling both content and slightly guilty. Nanao would undoubtedly learn something real from this. One was willing to teach, the other was willing to learn. It was a perfect match. After outlining Nanao's next phase of training, Uehara Shiroa left the 8th Division barracks. Meanwhile, within the 5th Division's barracks, a lone figure sat in quiet contemplation. Aizen Sosuke. His usually warm smile was absent as he stared ahead, lost in thought. Suddenly, the doors creaked open, and a silver-haired figure entered, his fox-like grin as unreadable as ever. Thinking about something, Lord Aizen? Ikemaru Jin drawled. Aizen's expression softened into an amused smile. It seems things have been rather lively outside, he mused. Jin tilted his head. A 7th seat from the 1st Division causing such a commotion? Seems a bit much, don't you think? The 7th seat? Aizen echoed, interest flickering in his gaze. You mean Uehara Shiroa? Jin nodded. That's him. He then continued his report. Lord Aizen, we've set up the spatial keto barriers in the designated Rukangai laboratories, just as you ordered. However, Jin's expression turned unreadable. That Otsutsuki Naruto didn't show up. It seems he's far more cautious than we expected. Aizen's smile deepened slightly. I hope he is. He murmured. Because the stronger his abilities are, the more interesting this will be. If he's too cautious, it'll be boring. Then, as if shifting topics entirely, Aizen added. For safety's sake, we should start preparations for the Hueco Mundo laboratory immediately. Jin raised an eyebrow, feigning mild surprise. So soon, Lord Aizen? Originally, they had planned to fully move into Hueco Mundo only after Aizen had secured his position as captain. Starting now would be a premature deviation from their original timeline. Aizen's voice remained calm, yet certain. A deviation from the plan, he said softly, is simply another form of transcendence over the plan. Then, his golden brown eyes gleamed as he instructed. Proceed patiently, Jin. Everything is still under our control. That night, Uehara Shiroa ventured out once more. This time, he disguised himself wearing camouflage glasses and a Toby mask. After all, if he had a hollow within him, it would be a shame not to wear a mask. Soon, he arrived at his secret base. As usual, he scanned the area to ensure that no one, especially in the hot spring, was present. Not sensing anyone, he let out a small sigh of relief. Then, he began his Zanpakuto meditation practice. A Shinigami's Zanpakuto was, at its core, a fusion of foreign souls. Much like Jin's Kamishini no Yari, Squad Zero's Food Zanpakuto, Hell's Blood Pond, or even the concept of hollows themselves. The shallow asachi that all Soul Reapers received were created by Otsunomea of Squad Zero. Each contained compressed foreign souls, which would later merge with a Shinigami's own Ryuryoku, eventually awakening as their true Zanpakuto. For years, Uehara Shiroa had meditated deeply on this concept. And now, he felt as though he was on the verge of unlocking the true nature of his Zanpakuto. Zaraki Kenpachi's blade was a permanently released Shurkai. Why?
Because to the weak-minded, it was unbelievable to think that a base-form Zanpakuto could cut down a captain-level opponent.
But Zaraki had done just that, slashing through foes with a Murasachi. And despite wielding a seemingly basic sword, he had climbed to immense heights of power.
Even Ichigo's Zangetsu was different.
His Shurikai wasn't truly a Zanpakuto. It was simply the manifestation of power fragments. Thus,
there was only one true Zanpakuto that had ever defied the laws of the Soul Society. A blade that had been permanently released from the moment it was born.
The only true permanent Shurikai Zanpakuto in history.
That blade was Shunkyo. A Zanpakuto that transcended even the rules of the Shinigami. Chapter 24, Meeting Yoruichi Again. Uehara Shiroa was quite satisfied with his current rate of growth. Moreover, another special mission would soon be completed.
Everything was progressing well, almost too well, and he had every reason to look forward to what lay ahead. Just then, without turning around, he spoke casually.
"Are you that afraid of me?" "Relax, I don't bite."
From the shadows, Shihoin Yoruichi emerged with a slightly frustrated expression.
"How did you notice me?"
The Onmitsukido and the Stealth Force excelled in assassination and infiltration, and both were practically the private armed forces of the Shihoin family. Yoruichi had honed her skills in stealth, assassination, and shuunpa since childhood. Yet now, despite years of training, she hadn't even managed to get close to her target without being noticed.
That stung a little. Uehara Shiroa finally turned around, his gaze meeting hers through the singular eye-hole of his mask.
Tonight, Yoruichi was dressed in a purple top and black tights, which perfectly accentuated her athletic figure.
Her outfit didn't look like one meant for battle. Shrugging, he responded in a relaxed tone, "Ever heard of Scent of a Woman?"
Yoruichi narrowed her eyes at the yellow spiral mask covering his face.
"And what's with the mask all of a sudden?
You even covered your eyes.
Can you even see through that?"
Uehara Shiroa's voice remained serious. "It's to avoid seeing things I shouldn't. Last time, I caught a glimpse of something, let's just say it was not a pleasant experience." Yoruichi clenched and unclenched her fists out of habit, contemplating his words.
Then, feigning nonchalance, she asked, "Is that mask of yours some kind of divine artifact?" "Yes," Uehara Shiroa answered smoothly. "A powerful one. It even has a story behind it." "A story?" Yoruichi arched a brow skeptically. "Yes," he continued, completely straight-faced. "This mask originates from a dog who suffered from hereditary mental pink eye since birth. But despite his condition, he was cheerful and kind, always helping old ladies cross the street. Then one day, he watched his beloved die right before his eyes. That moment broke him. His heart turned to ice as he gazed upon the world with despair. From that day forward, he wore a clown mask and swore he would never love again. It is said that if you gather Toby mask, Tom's piano, Vigo's sword, and Fei Yang Yang's horn, you can summon the King of Tengu and have any wish granted." *TL, what meme is this? Yoruichi blinked. The King of Tengu? Indeed, Uehara Shiroa nodded sagely. "And he'll grant any wish?" she repeated, half doubtful, half intrigued. "That's what they say," he replied, his tone solemn. Although his words sounded absurd, the way he delivered them with complete confidence and a steady, measured tone made it impossible to tell whether he was joking or not. Yoruichi found herself at a loss. Is he messing with me, or is there actually some truth to what he's saying? Meanwhile, Uehara Shiroa strolled over to a pirate flag lying nearby, picked it up, and unfurled it toward Yoruichi. "See this flag?" he asked. "I see it," she said flatly. "And? Give me money. I'm on the run. I have no money." "Then leave a divine weapon as collateral. Doesn't have to be anything too impressive. Something like, Ankin, will do." Yoruichi let out a laugh of disbelief. "Do you think Ankin grows on trees? Not to mention, I'm no longer the head of my family. Even if I were, I still wouldn't be able to just hand over a weapon like that." Uehara Shiroa sighed dramatically, tossing the pirate flag into the air and catching it again. "Fine.
I'll take a random divine weapon instead.
I'll even take a loss on this deal. Yoruchi smirked, sensing an opportunity. You don't actually need a divine weapon, do you? With your abilities, a weapon is hardly necessary. Your Zanpakuto's power is space-based, after all.
Uehara Shiroa immediately recognized that she was probing him for information. He ignored the bait, instead casually tossing the flag again and letting it land neatly on the ground. Then, with a sly smile, he remarked, "You do realize that with my abilities, I can come and go from the Shihoin mansion as I please, right? So, if the elder sister won't give in, maybe the younger brother will."
Yoruchi's expression darkened instantly. You wouldn't dare. Uehara Shiroa clicked his tongue. Oh, but I would. Miss Yoruchi, you wouldn't want your dear little Otudo to end up looking just like me, now would you? You bastard. Yoruchi nearly exploded.
She had been sneaking into the Soul Society repeatedly as of late to settle her family affairs, most importantly, to ensure her younger brother, Yushiro, was protected. But before she had even figured out this guy's full capabilities, he had already zeroed in on her biggest weakness.
And the worst part?
She knew he actually had the power to back up his threats. This man was even more unpredictable than Aizen. What had the Soul Society done to deserve both of these monsters? Taking a deep breath, Yoruchi exhaled slowly before making a calculated offer.
Let's cooperate. As long as you help us take down Aizen, you can have whatever you want. Cooperation? Uehara Shiroa rubbed his chin thoughtfully, then suddenly asked in an exaggeratedly serious tone, "What if I want the thing, but not the cooperation?" Yoruchi clenched her fists. You deserve to die. Uehara Shiroa chuckled. Ah, look at you. You're getting anxious.
Annoyed beyond reason, Yoruchi swung a punch at him only for it to hit nothing but air. Her fist passed straight through his afterimage. She took a step back, finally regaining her composure.
Why won't you cooperate with us? It benefits all of us. You're not afraid of Aizen, are you? This isn't about fear, Uehara Shiroa said as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. I simply prefer to side with the winner.
Yoruchi's gaze sharpened.
Aizen is just a rat hiding in the shadows. He won't deceive everyone forever. Sooner or later, we'll return to the Soul Society and expose him. Uehara Shiroa couldn't help but chuckle. Oh? And what exactly are you relying on to return? The will of fire? The will of D? The dark will? Or perhaps the legendary golden spirit? Yoruchi frowned, but he continued mercilessly. You still don't understand why you lost. You and Aizen are playing two entirely different games. You're playing hide and seek. But Aizen? He's playing werewolf. He hasn't eliminated all of you yet simply because the timing isn't right. Why? Because Soul Society itself is not his end goal. If he truly cared about it, you'd all be kneeling right now, calling him Captain Aizen. Yoruchi refused to be discouraged. A lie will always be exposed in the end. The truth will come to light. Uehara Shiroa chuckled. As a member of the 5 great noble families, don't you know? Our world is built on lies. Soul Society itself is a lie. And do you know the biggest one? The so-called Soul King that the Zero Squad and the 5 great nobles claim to protect, is nothing more than a mutilated corpse. Yoruchi's pupils shrank in shock. You even know that, she whispered. Then, does this mean you're siding with Aizen? Uehara Shiroa shook his head and smirked. Not necessarily. What I mean is, your way of thinking is too shallow. You need a leader who can see the bigger picture. Chapter 25, High-Ranking Officer? All you need is hands. In the secret base, Shihoin Yoruchi's mouth twitched as she stared at Uehara Shiroa with an expression of pure contempt. Are you implying that you should be the leader? She scoffed. I've never seen someone who wants to gain everything without lifting a finger. Who are you trying to fool? Uehara Shiroa puffed out his chest. It doesn't have to be me, but since none of you are capable, I have to step in. Yaruchi's patience finally wore thin. Planting her hands on her hips, she shot him a glare. Let's be honest, you just want to profit from this situation, don't you? And you all just want to use me as cannon fodder against Aizen, don't you? Uehara Shiroa sneered. From the very beginning, he had never taken their so-called cooperation seriously. Even someone as straightforward as Kurosaki Ichigo had been manipulated by Urahara Kisuke and Yaruchi. Compared to him, there was no doubt these two would scheme against him even more ruthlessly. Anyone who had watched Bleach knew one thing: if you ever encountered Urahara Kisuke or Aizen, the best course of action was to attack first and ask questions never. These two were so cunning that if you tossed a glass bead into their minds, it would take a year to roll out. Uehara Shiroha, however, wasn't one for overly complicated scheming. He wasn't about to play mind games or get dragged into their plots. So, he simply refused to comply, neither through threats nor persuasion. And what could they do about it? Yaruchi sighed, realizing she had no way to deal with him. Frustrated, she tried a different approach. You can't seriously expect to get something for nothing, right? Their so-called cooperation had never been about actual teamwork, it was just a way to keep Otsutsuki Naruto in check. It was a desperate move on their part. After all, Aizen's illusions, as tricky as they were, still had traces to follow. But this Otsutsuki Naruto? He was a complete enigma, both in terms of identity and abilities. He was like a ghost, unpredictable and untouchable. Dealing with Aizen alone was already nightmarish. Adding this mysterious factor into the equation made it almost impossible to strategize. Yet Uehara Shiroa remained smug, as if he had already won. If I haven't done anything, that's exactly why you should give me something. After all, I could just take it by force, you know? Yaruchi clenched her fists. She really wanted to punch him right now. Suppressing her irritation, she tried to negotiate. Fine. Since cooperation is off the table, how about an exchange? I'll give you a divine weapon, and in return, you provide us with information. Sound fair? She had no choice but to lower her stance. The situation left her no room to be picky. Never in her life had she imagined Shihoin Yaruchi, the head of the noble Shihoin family, former captain of the 2nd Division, would one day be forced into a compromise like this. Uehara Shiroa smirked. Sensing that the time was right, he made another offer. I'll give you a better deal, one that benefits you more. Not only will I not touch your brother, but I'll even make sure he stays safe when nothing's happening. Deal. Yaruchi agreed immediately, not hesitating for even a second. Yashiro may have been relatively safe in the noble district, but Yaruchi knew better than anyone how dark and corrupt Soul Society's nobility could be. So, if an extra layer of protection was available, even if it came in the form of an insurance payment, she'd take it. Uehara Shiroa clapped his hands together, looking pleased. Congratulations on making the right choice. To him, this was basically getting a divine weapon for free. It would have been a waste not to take it. Of course, he was well aware that Yaruchi and Urahara were only trying to keep him in check. But did he care? Not one bit. In the end, Yaruchi handed over the divine weapon she had prepared in advance, then turned and left without looking back. She had to leave. If she stayed any longer, she might actually lose control and hit him. Losing a divine weapon for nothing was already infuriating enough, she didn't need to add his smugness to the mix. That night, Uehara Shiroa soaked in a hot spring, savoring the victory. He glanced at the divine weapon in his hand before casually tossing it into the shattered space, letting it slowly merge with the death gloves. It was just a rope-type magic weapon, and clearly one of the lowest grade ones. But that was fine. He didn't need an amazing weapon just yet. If it was too powerful, death gloves wouldn't be able to integrate it properly. And besides, this was just the beginning. As the 7th seed of the 1st Division, he had no reason to stir up trouble. There was no need for pointless battles. It was better to just relax and be a salted fish. Still, Otsutsuki Naruto couldn't go to waste. It was time to put some pressure on Urahara Kisuke, Yaruchi, and Aizen. Once they were all dancing in his palm,
he could enjoy reaping the benefits from both sides. And if nothing else, just using Yashiro as leverage alone was going to benefit him for a lifetime. The next morning, Uehara Shiroa woke up early and quickly completed his daily tasks. Today's task, show off your singing voice, was simple. He just had to sing something random. Effortlessly completing the task, he earned a round of cheers from the First Division dormitory. Placing his left hand on his chest and tipping his hat with his right, he gave a gentlemanly bow, prompting another wave of screams from the female Shinigami. At this point, after completing so many daily missions, Uehara Shiroa had mastered an impressive range of skills: piano, chess, calligraphy, painting, storytelling, poetry, and, of course, singing. In Soul Society, he was already something of a trendsetter. Many female Shinigami admired him not just for his appearance but for his sheer talent. This was why Uehara Shiroa was still somewhat respected on the Woman Shinigami Association's blacklist, unlike Shunsui Kairaku, who was considered a complete negative example. After receiving his rewards, Kido +1, Shadow Clone Proficiency +1, Uehara Shiroa headed toward the 8th Division barracks. There, Ayase Nanao had been waiting for days, having prepared a delicious breakfast, all made by her own hands. Uehara Shiroa took a bite, then nodded approvingly at the nervous girl. "It suits my taste. You put in a lot of effort." Ayase Nanao let out a breath of relief, her face lighting up. "Teacher Uehara. Whether it's keto or cooking, I'll continue to work hard." "Good, good. That's the spirit," Uehara Shiroa said as he leisurely enjoyed the meal and Nanao's attentive service. Meanwhile, in the 8th Division office, Kairaku Shunsui, who had been watching the scene unfold, took a sip of his medicinal tea. For some reason, it tasted even more bitter than usual. Recently, he'd been overworked, busy day and night, and his back was aching terribly. But what truly unsettled him was the scene in front of him. Looking at Nanao's eager expression as she served Uehara Shiroa, Kairaku had a sudden, dreadful realization. His precious Nanao was about to be snatched away at the speed of light. Why did it feel like he had just invited a wolf into his home? And yet, if it was Uehara Shiroa, well, perhaps it wasn't entirely impossible. Chapter 26, The Expanding Tsunoyoshiro Family. If anyone else had said this, Ayase Nanao would have dismissed it as arrogance. But coming from Uehara Shiroa, the words carried undeniable weight. After all, Uehara Shiroa was infamous in Soul Society for his laid-back, playboy lifestyle. At the same time, he was also recognized as a prodigy. Powerful, versatile, and undeniably brilliant. More importantly, Ayase Nanao had personally experienced his exceptional teaching abilities and his astonishing proficiency in Kido. As she gazed at him with admiration, Uehara Shiroa smirked. "If this system operated on a favorability meter instead of a task system, I'd probably see a notification pop up right now." Without further delay, the two resumed their training. After another intensive lesson, Ayase Nanao's proficiency in Kido had advanced significantly. Her appreciation for Uehara Shiroa deepened as well. Meanwhile, Uehara Shiroa was pleased with her progress. At this rate, this special mission will be completed in no time. And once it was done, the war between Soul Society and Hueco Mundo would likely break out. When that happened, he knew he'd have to make a move. After all, the three old men in the First Division had tolerated his antics for long enough. They were probably itching to use this opportunity to test him. But Uehara Shiroa wasn't concerned. That night, he headed to the pleasure district for a drink. "Master Shiroa, you haven't visited for several days." Matsuko, a courtesan with a sweet, satisfied smile, greeted him warmly. This kind of tenderness and charm was reserved exclusively for Uehara Shiroa. She had been with him from the beginning and had long since become his personal courtesan. With one pouring tea and wine while the other sipped leisurely, the two conversed in a relaxed manner, their laughter mingling with the warm glow of the lanterns. Uehara Shiroa enjoyed the atmosphere. He wasn't particularly fond of bloodshed and conflict, though, of course, he wouldn't allow anyone to bring the fight to him either. Just as he was basking in the moment, his expression suddenly shifted. He listened carefully. From outside, he heard a maid's voice attempting to stop someone, followed by a rough, arrogant voice.
I am a guard of the Tsunoya Shiro family. And yet, a mere geisha dares to put on airs? I've never even heard of the 7th seat of the 1st division. Ha! You so-called Shinigami are nothing more than lapdogs raised by my master. Hearing this, Uehara Shiroa smiled at Matsuko. Prepare me a cup of wine. I'll be right back.
Then, he stood up, opened the door, and stepped out.
Outside, the Tsunoya Shiro family's personal Shinigami was brandishing his sword, trying to intimidate the two maids.
The courtesans of the pleasure district weren't defenseless, they also functioned as half-guards and had managed to hold him back. But as a dog of a great noble house, the Shinigami was used to getting his way. And now, he had drawn his sword in frustration.
Uehara Shiroa took in the scene in an instant.
Aside from 2 hidden Onmitsukido scouts stationed by Suifeng, there were no other Shinigami present. After confirming that this wasn't a setup, he drew his own blade and shouted. Who is this lunatic daring to draw a sword against the 7th seat of the 1st division?
Stand down.
Before the Tsunoya Shiro member could react, an overwhelming wave of freezing energy surged toward him, instantly encasing him in ice.
Uehara Shiroa had deliberately used excessive force.
Even if the man survived, he would be crippled for life. From the shadows, the 2 Onmitsukido scouts watched in stunned silence.
What now? Should they continue tracking him? Should they step in? Can we even win? While they hesitated, Uehara Shiroa turned toward them with a sharp glare. There are accomplices? Who are you? How dare you conspire to assassinate a seated officer of the 1st Division?
Before either of them could react, his stand ability, White Album, activated soundlessly. 2 more ice sculptures appeared where they had been standing. This time, however, he held back. Not because he wanted to show mercy, but because he didn't want to offend 2 great noble families at once. After all, if he stirred up too much trouble, Captain Commander Yamamoto would have to step in to protect him. And that would just lead to him getting scolded. With that settled, Uehara Shiroa turned on his heel and leisurely strolled back inside. Sitting down, he picked up his cup. Great taste.
Not bad. Matsuko, who had initially gone pale with fear, now gazed at him with admiration.
Brother Shiroa, I might have caused you some trouble.
Not long after, Kayaraka Shunsui arrived to check on the situation, handling the aftermath while wearing his usual lazy smile.
My conflicts with the Tsunoya Shiro family run deep, he explained.
And since we're friends, it's inevitable they'd target you too.
Lately, the Tsunoya Shiro family has been growing more aggressive.
You should be careful.
Among the 5 great noble houses, the family that guarded hell had long since withdrawn from Soul Society. The Shiba family had exiled themselves to Rukangai. The Kuchiki family remained bound by the rules of the 6th Division and noble traditions. The Shihoin family once had power through the 2nd Division and Onmitsukido, but after Yoruchi defected, their influence had weakened.
With so many old families in decline, the Tsunoya Shiro family had become the greatest beneficiary.
They had been expanding rapidly, growing increasingly arrogant.
This provocation against Uehara Shiroha?
It was simply a test to see how much they could push the Gotiei 13.
After all, the noble families in the Gotiei 13 operated as 2 separate systems. Technically, the nobles still ruled over the Gotiei 13. Even as a captain, Kayaraka Shunsui had little authority over them. But Uehara Shiroa remained indifferent. Brother Kayaraku, you're being too polite. There's no need to talk about dragging me into trouble, our relationship isn't that shallow.
I don't start trouble, but I'm never afraid of it.
Even if the Tsunoya Shiro family has deep roots, well, I have the Captain Commander backing me.
This was truly an unexpected situation. Kayaraka Shunsui came from an upper-class noble family himself, and he was skilled at maneuvering through political games. Yet now, the Tsunoya Shiro family had set their sights on him and by extension, Uehara Shiroa.
The irony was almost amusing.
I was planning to target the Tsunoya Shiro family eventually, Uehara Shiroa mused. But before he could make a move, they had thrown themselves at him first.
Kayaraka Shunsui shook his head in disbelief. Ha, you really are something else. In the end, the matter was left unresolved. The Tsuneyashiro family and the noble houses of Seoul society as a whole knew better than to directly challenge Yamamoto Genryusai Shigekuni. After all, the old noble families still remembered what kind of ruthless monster the original Gotei 13 had been 1,000 years ago. But what puzzled them was why Yamamoto, who was always strict about rules, was protecting this kid. Who exactly was Uehara Shiroha? Not only was he brazenly fearless, but he was also receiving special treatment from Yamamoto himself. Meanwhile, Suifeng was furious. Glaring at the two subordinates who had just recovered, she snapped. You two are supposed to be the elite of the Onmitsukido's first division. And yet, you were captured so easily? You've brought shame to the entire corps. Deep inside, she desperately wanted to drag Uehara Shiroha straight to the maggot's nest. But since Yamamoto had spoken, she had no choice but to obey. Chapter 27, Night Exploration of Noble Street. As night fell, Uehara Shiroha left a shadow clone as a decoy and quietly made his way toward the noble district of Suriitii. Noble Street was located east of the 6th Division barracks, almost at the very center of Suriitii. The district's central area was filled with extravagant mansions, private medical facilities, and high-end dining establishments, luxuries reserved exclusively for the noble class. Without noble lineage or special permission, even a captain-level Shinigami wasn't allowed to set foot here. Of course, if someone really wanted to sneak in, they could use the sewer system beneath Suriitii. But for Uehara Shiroha, such methods were unnecessary. With his Zanpakuto ability that's similar like Kamui called Shunkyo, Fleeting Void, bypassing the district's security was effortless. Although the barriers here weren't as absurdly fortified as those guarding the Soul King's palace, they still weren't to be underestimated. Along the way, Uehara Shiroha detected multiple layers of concealed barriers and traps made of sekiseki. For most ordinary captains, breaching these defenses wouldn't be easy. But for him? They might as well not exist. As he strolled forward, a thought crossed his mind. If only I could get an item like the Marauder's Map from Harry Potter. Imagine how lively that would be. On the surface, Soul Society appeared peaceful. But in reality? It was a den of monsters. At night, the hidden forces lurking in the shadows would emerge. Aizen, lost in his research. A loving sister secretly watching over her brother. Kuratsuchi Mayuri, conducting twisted experiments. As a hero, quietly observing everything. Tsuneyoshiro Tokunada, plotting the annihilation of his own family. Each one had their own deadly talents. But none of them could compare to his ability to become a hollow at will. With no obstacles in his path, Uehara Shiroha reached the heart of Noble Street. Here, grand mansions lined the streets, each more extravagant than the last. One particular residence stood out, a gaudy display of excessive wealth, with a nameplate inscribed with the word Omida. Ah, so this is the Omida family's estate. The Omidas were a notoriously wealthy noble family, practically Suriitii's equivalent of nouveau riche. Omida Marekio's father, Omida Marenishin, was only a vice-captain, yet he had the wealth to casually purchase a gem mine. At this point in time, however, Marenishin had not yet officially retired from his position as vice-captain of the 2nd Division and commander of the Onmitsukido. He was still in the process of handing over his responsibilities. During this transition period, Omida Marenishin and some veteran Onmitsukido members were stationed near the Shihoin estate, ensuring its security. As Uehara Shiroha approached, he sensed several concealed spiritual pressures. It was clear that ever since Yoruchi's defection, certain factions had set their sights on the Shihoin family's wealth and influence. Despite the nobles' so-called honor and hierarchy, they had their own traditions of betrayal. Let's not forget the power of the 5 great noble houses came from their betrayal of the Soul King. If these people truly believed in following the rules, they would have been devoured long ago. The noble families weren't united. They were in constant competition, always scheming and backstabbing one another. Thinking about this, Uehara Shiroha raised his gaze toward the largest mansion on the street. It towered over the surrounding buildings, its sheer extravagance an insult to the concept of modesty.
The mainstream architecture of Seoul society followed a style reminiscent of Japan's Heian period, simple, integrated with nature, and rarely exceeding 3 stories. Even the Kuchiki estate, owned by one of the oldest and most powerful noble houses, maintained a relatively traditional design. But this place? It was practically declaring itself the ruler of Suriitii. This was the Tsuneyoshiro family's mansion. The same Tsuneyoshiro family that had not only betrayed the Soul King but dismembered him for their own gain. Flaunting your power like this? You're just begging for death. Disgust filled Uehara Shirowa's heart. The sheer inequality in Seoul society was sickening. One single street hoarded 99% of Suriitii's wealth and resources. Was that reasonable? Of course not. Time to fix that imbalance. Besides, there was a good chance that Tsuneyoshiro family had already marked him as a target. That alone was enough reason to act. Without hesitation, he summoned a shadow clone and sent it off to randomly select a lucky victim. The next day, news spread through Noble Street like wildfire, sending shockwaves through the great noble houses. A member of the Tsuneyoshiro family, Tsuneyoshiro Komagawa, had been assassinated overnight. The only clue left at the scene? The emblem of the Onmitsukido. Though Tsuneyoshiro Komagawa had a horrendous reputation, his hands stained with countless crimes, the Tsuneyoshiro family didn't care about commoners' lives. What did it matter if a few ants died? But for them, a noble's life was different. The Tsuneyoshiro family saw themselves as the leaders of the 5 great noble houses. They looked down upon shinigami, commoners, and even lower-ranking nobles. To them, shinigami were disposable. Commoners were disposable. But a Tsuneyoshiro? Unacceptable. This wasn't just a murder, it was a provocation. A humiliation. Outraged, the Tsuneyoshiro family immediately pressured the Central 46. Normally, internal matters between noble houses were handled by the Gold Seal Noble Council, a governing body that outranked the Central 46 in noble affairs. However, when it came to execution and enforcement, both the Gold Seal Council and the Central 46 needed the cooperation of the Gotei 13 and the Onmitsukido. Which meant, in the end, this entire mess fell onto Captain Commander Yamamoto's desk. Inside the 1st Division barracks, Yamamoto Genryosei Shigakuni sat calmly, hands resting on his cane, eyes closed. Last night, he said, his voice steady, a member of the Tsuneyoshiro family was killed. The Onmitsukido's insignia was left at the scene. What is the meaning of this? Though the Onmitsukido was officially under the 2nd Division, in reality, its authority was divided among several noble families. It served as a buffer between the Gotei 13 and the nobles, preventing direct conflicts between them. But after Yoruchi's defection, the balance had shifted. I have no idea, Captain Commander. Suifong responded immediately. Truthfully, she was completely confused. Was the Shihoin family declaring war on the Tsuneyoshiros? She had heard nothing about this. Her mind was in turmoil. Ever since she had crossed paths with Uehara Shirowa, her life had never been smooth. Not long ago, 2 of her Onmitsukido officers had been frozen on the spot by him and falsely accused of conspiring against the Gotei 13. That incident was still unresolved, and the perpetrator had yet to be punished. The Onmitsukido and herself as its leader had become a laughingstock. And now, this new disaster had landed at her feet. Suifong clenched her fists, suppressing the urge to scream. This was really getting out of hand. Chapter 28, Undercurrents in Suriitii. You are the commander of the Onmitsukido. Shouldn't you know about this? Yamamoto Genryosei Shigakuni frowned, pausing briefly before continuing. This incident took place in the Noble District, and the Gotei 13 cannot intervene directly. We must investigate this matter as soon as possible. Because the Onmitsukido and the Shihoin family were deeply entangled, Yamamoto preferred to avoid being dragged into noble conflicts. Thus, he only issued orders to comply with the Central 40SAXS directives in a perfunctory manner. Understood. Suifong responded respectfully, bowing her head. As someone who strictly adhered to rules and orders, she knew better than to question a direct command. After a moment of silence, Yamamoto Genryusei Shigakuni added, "Also, you should be aware of the strategic deployment regarding Hueco Mundo. The Onmitsukido should begin preparations. Your forces will be needed for reconnaissance and intelligence gathering. I will not disappoint you, Captain." A sense of duty surged within Suifeng as she vowed to perform beyond expectations. A few days later, news of the murder of several Tsunoyoshiro clan members had spread among the high-ranking Shinigami. A noble family member being assassinated was an unprecedented event, sending shockwaves through the Soul Society. Even individuals like Aizen, ever calculating and enigmatic, took notice and shared their thoughts on the situation. While the Tsunoyoshiro family had never openly opposed the Shihoin, they had secretly worked to undermine their influence. With their patriarch having defected, the Shihoin family was left vulnerable, unable to do anything but endure the political pressure. Suifeng personally led an investigative team to the Tsunoyoshiro estate, but the results were inconclusive. The only clue left at the crime scene was an armband belonging to the Onmitsukido, seemingly placed there as a deliberate provocation. Although she had her own suspicions, she knew better than to voice them without solid evidence. Seizing the opportunity, the Tsunoyoshiro family used the incident as a pretext to weaken the Onmitsukido, claiming that their lack of competency had allowed the attack to occur. In their eyes, the growth of the Onmitsukido directly benefited the Shihoin family. Even though the Onmitsukido technically served them, the Tsunoyoshiro had no hesitation in crippling their strength for political gain. With tensions escalating behind the scenes, the atmosphere within the Soul Society became increasingly strained. Meanwhile, at the 8th Division training grounds, Uehara Shiroa remained unfazed by the brewing storm, continuing his lessons with Ayase Nanao as if nothing had happened. Observing her stance, he smiled casually and said, "Don't hesitate. Use your strongest Kido against me. Only then can I pinpoint where you need improvement." Training an intelligent and diligent disciple was a rewarding experience. Ayase Nanao was progressing at an impressive rate, requiring only minimal guidance to make significant leaps in her abilities. At this pace, the 3-month deadline for her mission was more than sufficient. She might even complete her training within a month. Taking a deep breath, Ayase Nanao raised her hand, channeling her spiritual pressure. Heido number 58, Tenran. A spiraling gust of wind erupted from her palm, surging toward Uehara Shiroa with immense force. Yet, as the powerful Kido attack hurtled toward him, he remained motionless. With a slight flick of his wrist, his spiritual pressure surged, instantly neutralizing the technique. The raging wind vanished into thin air as if it had never existed. Ayase Nanao staggered slightly, feeling an oppressive weight settle over her, as though the very air had turned to stone, pressing down on her chest. Just as quickly as it came, the sensation disappeared. Looking up, she saw that her full-powered Kido had been effortlessly negated. A wave of frustration washed over her. Despite her rapid improvement, she still felt utterly powerless. How was she still so weak after all this effort? Noticing her disappointment, Uehara Shiroa offered a reassuring smile. "Don't be discouraged. Your Kido is already at the peak level for an officer. If you push past this point, you'll reach vice captain level." The vice captain level? Ayase Nanao blinked in disbelief, feeling as if she had misheard him. "Teacher Uehara, is that really possible?" Just a short while ago, her proficiency in Kido had barely qualified her as an officer. Yet, in only a few days under Uehara Shiroa's tutelage, she had grown strong enough to rival elite spellcasters in the Gotei 13. And now, he was saying she was on the verge of breaking into vice captain level? It was too fast, almost unreal. Seeing her mixture of shock and excitement, Uehara Shiroa chuckled. "Nothing is impossible. Vice captain is just the beginning." "Yes, Mr. Uehara," Ayase Nanao exclaimed, her doubts melting away. Even if she sometimes lacked confidence in herself, she would never doubt Uehara Shiroa. Her determination reignited, and Uehara Shiroa nodded approvingly before giving further instruction. Reaching vice captain level isn't just about raw power. You need a solid foundation, sufficient spiritual pressure, and most importantly, a strong will. Your spiritual pressure must carry weight. If your resolve wavers, your Kido will be powerless.
A weak conviction leads to a weak Zanpakuto. The power system of the Soul Reapers was deeply rooted in willpower and belief. A Zanpakuto wielded by someone without conviction was nothing more than an empty blade, one that could never cut. Likewise, spiritual pressure was an extension of one's soul. The difference between an officer and a true combatant was night and day. For someone like Uehara Shiroa, most officers were as harmless as infants. Their presence was blank, like a sheet of paper, completely devoid of threat. Vice captains, however, were a different story. While still no match for him, they at least had the foundation of real combatants' spiritual pressure that carried weight in techniques that were not entirely superficial. Ise Nanao absorbed his words, deep in thought, as another realization clicked into place. At that moment, Kayaraka Shunsui, who had been quietly observing from the sidelines, finally stepped forward with his usual relaxed smile. "Brother Shiroha, got a moment to talk?" Uehara Shiroa turned to him with an amused expression before nodding and following him. They strolled across the training grounds, their steps slow and unhurried. The warm breeze rustled the grass as Kayaraka Shunsui spoke. "I really have to thank you for looking after my precious Nanao-chan," he said with a chuckle. "But honestly, I'm still wrapping my head around how ridiculously talented you are as a teacher." Shunsui shook his head in amazement. To think that in just a few days, her Keto proficiency has surpassed some of the best Keto users in the Gotai 13, that's something else. Unlike someone as calculating as Aizen, Kayaraka Shunsui had long been aware that Uehara Shiroa was far stronger than he let on. The old men of the 1st Division, Yamamoto, Unohana, and Otsu, had already acknowledged that Uehara Shiroa's strength far exceeded his current rank. Even so, Kayarako had only estimated his power to be around vice-captain level at best. However, after what he witnessed today, he realized how far off his assumptions had been. He had completely underestimated Uehara Shiroa. Vice-captain level? That wasn't even close. For someone like Uehara Shiroa, a vice-captain might as well be an ant. Chapter 29, Special Care from Old Man Yamamoto. "No, it was just a piece of cake," Uehara Shiroa replied casually, acknowledging Kayaraka Shunsui's gratitude with a polite smile. He didn't mind displaying his overwhelming spiritual pressure and mastery of Zankan-Kiso in front of Kayaraku and the others. After all, his true trump cards were the mission system and Shunkyo. Teaching Ise Nanao Keto? That was nothing. The real priority was completing the special mission. Kayaraka Shunsui adjusted his bamboo hat, his expression unusually serious under its shadow. "For you, it might be nothing," he said slowly. "But for me, and especially for that child, it means everything." His tone carried a rare hint of regret as he continued, "Ever since Lisa's disappearance, I blamed myself. I was careless. I shouldn't have let her take that mission. Now, I'm afraid Nanao will one day find herself in a similar situation." Shunsui sighed, rubbing the back of his neck before adding, "And unlike Lisa, Nanao can't even wield a Zanpakuto. But now that you're guiding her, I feel much more at ease." Uehara Shiroa smiled at the concern in his voice. "Brother Kayaraku, you're being too hard on yourself. What happened to Lisa wasn't your fault." Then, flashing a confident grin, he added, "You don't have to worry anymore. As her teacher, I'll make sure Nanao is protected. Just leave her to me." Kayaraka Shunsui's smile froze momentarily. His grip on Kaiten Kayakatsu tightened ever so slightly. After their brief exchange, Kayaraka got back to business. "You've heard about what happened at the Tsuneyushiro estate, right? If the victims had been ordinary citizens, Kayaraka Shunsui would have been furious and demanded an investigation. But since it was the Tsuneyushiro family, one of the most corrupt noble clans in Seoul society, his only reaction was to pour himself another drink. "Of course I know," Uehara Shiroa replied nonchalantly. "After all, I was the one who did it." Kayaraku smirked. "Well, the Central 46 isn't satisfied with the Onmitsukido's handling of the case. They've decided to assign 1st Division to oversee their operations." Then, with a teasing grin, he added, "Old man Yamamoto wants you to take the job. You'll even get to reunite with your girlfriend, aren't you touched?" "Not really. Seeing Kayaraku's gloating expression, Uehara sighed. Everyone knows there's a small misunderstanding between me and Captain Suifong, yet he still assigned me to this? The old man definitely did this on purpose. All because I slacked off for a few days and took a couple of bottles of his precious sake. Seriously, how stingy can he be? That was from his personal collection. Kayaraka corrected with a grin. Even I haven't gotten to drink much of it. You're lucky he only gave you this mission as payback. Then, his expression grew more serious. That aside, be careful when dealing with the 2nd Division. We've got a major operation coming up, and we'll need the Onmitsukido's full cooperation. Kayaraka Shunsui didn't doubt Uehara Shirowa's abilities. Previously, he had worried that the stealth force might make things difficult for his younger comrade. But now? With Uehara's strength, it wasn't clear who would be the one feeling embarrassed. The plan to invade Hueco Mundo, right? Uehara Shirowa mused, crossing his arms. It's about time. If we keep stalling, those hollows will end up partying in Soul Society instead. Lately, hollow activity had surged. Not just in the world of the living, but even within Rukongai. If the Gotei 13 didn't take decisive action soon, things would spiral out of control. But Uehara Shirowa wasn't worried. He had already made the necessary preparations. Besides, his special mission was about to reward him soon. And as for the 2nd Division? A mere Suifong wasn't enough to concern him. If worst came to worst, he could just let old man Yama and Kayaraku handle the political mess. He had zero fear of offending nobles. And if the aristocrats really tried to make trouble for him? He'd just go hang out in the human world and live a carefree life. Not a big deal. The two discussed strategic plans for Hueco Mundo in detail. An operation of this scale required full cooperation from all divisions and absolute support from the Kido Corps. Speaking of which, Mayuri Kuratsuchi had been busy during the chief and deputy chief's absence. The mad scientist had taken advantage of the situation to poach some of the best Kido users, effectively stealing talent from the noble families. As expected of someone who had once studied at Maggot's Nest, Mayuri's cunning knew no bounds. Uehara Shirowa offered his own insights on the upcoming war. Since he had already read the script, his knowledge was akin to having perfect foresight. Every time he spoke, he cut straight to the heart of the matter, impressing Kayaraka Shunsui with his precise and insightful analysis. By nightfall, the two had made their way to the Flower District, where another long night of indulgence awaited them. Later that night, Hanamachi Tavern. As the lively atmosphere buzzed around them, Uehara Shirowa subtly channeled his spiritual pressure, clearing his mind instantly. One of the perks of having a strong Ryatsu, a slight adjustment was all it took to sober up. And if that didn't work? He always had the horse talisman. Meanwhile, Kayaraka Shunsui remained in his drunken stupor, muttering about how wine doesn't make a man drunk, only a man makes himself drunk. Uehara enjoyed the atmosphere but had no intention of staying inebriated all night. Activating Shuinpa, he left the tavern and returned to his squad barracks. After conducting a final horse talisman scan, Uehara dismissed his shadow clones, absorbing the accumulated experience and further solidifying his strength. Then, leaving behind another shadow clone, he quietly slipped into the night. His destination? The underground base beneath Sokayaku Hill. Upon arrival, Yoruchi Shihoin was already waiting for him, her arms crossed, her golden eyes sharp with suspicion. "Otsutsuki Naruto," she called out. "You're the one who killed Tsuneyoshiro Kamagawa, aren't you?" As the head of the Onmitsukido, she had access to every intelligence network in Soul Society. This assassination was beyond the capabilities of ordinary assassins. Even her own forces wouldn't have been able to bypass the layers of barriers and defensive measures surrounding noble estates. The only ones capable of such an act were Aizen, and this mysterious Otsutsuki Naruto. Uehara Shirowa casually pulled out a chair from his spatial storage, reclining lazily as he replied. "As far as I know, your family and the Tsuneyoshiro family don't get along. Shouldn't you be celebrating Kamagawa's death instead of interrogating me?" Yoruchi's eyes narrowed. "Why did you target the nobles?" Most Soul Reapers wouldn't dare touch the aristocrats.
There was no benefit in it, only trouble.
Uehara Shiroa smirked. Didn't you ask me to protect Yushiro?
And you even gave me a divine weapon to assist me. Feigning sincerity, he added, I simply thought the best defense was a good offense. Kill the monkey, scare the chickens.
Now that the Tsuneyashiro family has lost one of their own, don't you think they'll hesitate before messing with the Shihoin clan again? Yoruchi's expression darkened. That breaks the rules. Uehara Shiroa scoffed. Who made those rules? Did they ask me first?
He leaned back with a smirk. The nobles cling to rules because rules are the only thing protecting them.
But those rules? They don't apply to me. Chapter 30, Upgrading the Fighting Team and Inspecting the Second Squad. You really are.
Shihoin Yoruchi had seen plenty of reckless individuals in her time. After all, as the leader of the Onmitsukido's executive militia, she was responsible for overseeing the most dangerous criminals confined within the maggot's nest. She had encountered all kinds of dangerous people. But the man standing before her wasn't just lawless, he acted with an audacity that bordered on insanity, backed by the sheer power to carry out his whims.
Common outlaws? They were nothing. Easily captured, locked away, and left to rot until death took them. But what was one supposed to do with someone like this? A man who disregarded all rules, a madman who did whatever he pleased? Yoruchi had no real answer. She could only frown and ask, then why did you deliberately leave the Onmitsukido emblem at the scene?
Because of that, everyone now thinks this has something to do with my Shihoin family.
Tsunoyoshiro Kamagawa's death had been inevitable, but its circumstances couldn't have been worse. The Tsunoyoshiro family had been making moves against the Shihoin for days. Then, suddenly, a Tsunoyoshiro was murdered, and the killer left behind the Onmitsukido's insignia. The Shihoin family and the Onmitsukido had always been closely tied together. This wasn't just problematic, it was disastrous.
Yoruchi had no intention of letting her family take the blame for a crime they didn't commit.
I wanted them to think it was you, Uehara Shiroa answered matter-of-factly. Otherwise, why would I leave the emblem? For fun?
His tone was almost amused, as if the whole thing were some elaborate joke.
If it had nothing to do with you, it wouldn't have the same effect. Besides, in a way, it does have something to do with you. Yoruchi's expression darkened. Explain. You made the weapon.
I used it to kill him, Uehara said casually. He was a man who cared only for killing, not for consequences, not for cover-ups.
He killed when he wanted to. He did whatever he pleased. Whether the noble families fell into chaos or not had nothing to do with him.
In fact, he welcomed it.
If every single noble perished, he would simply inherit their wealth.
Besides, the one who committed the murder wasn't him, it was Otsutsuki Naruto.
What did that have to do with Uehara Shiroha? You.
Yoruchi felt a surge of frustration so strong that she nearly coughed up blood.
Was this related to her? Absolutely not. Did it look related to her? Unfortunately, yes.
Otsutsuki Naruto had no personal vendetta against the Tsunoyoshiro family.
Why would he kill them unless it was on behalf of the Shihoin?
Even though she knew the truth, explaining it to others would be impossible, just like how she had been forced to flee Soul Society all those years ago.
Yoruchi felt a headache coming on.
Every time she interacted with this Otsutsuki Naruto, things spiraled further from her original plan, and her thoughts drifted in directions she hadn't intended. But now, there was no turning back. Seeing her troubled expression, Uehara Shiroa offered what could only be described as an attempt at comfort. If I told you that I did it just for fun, and that it had nothing to do with the Shihoin family, would that make you feel better? How the hell would that make me feel better?
Yoruchi snapped, completely enraged. You bastard, stand still and let me hit you. She swung a fist at him and actually landed a hit. Yoruchi blinked in surprise.
He hadn't used that strange ability of his. Not thinking too deeply about it, she followed up with a series of attacks using her piercing point technique, focusing her spiritual pressure to bypass a Shinigami's natural defenses. Each time her fist made contact, however, his figure flickered, vanishing and reappearing a short distance away. With every hit, he became more difficult to deal with. Gradually, Yoruchi grew more serious. Partly because she needed to vent her frustrations. And partly because this was a valuable opportunity to gather information. For a long while, they exchanged blows. Half a day later, Uehara Shiroa stretched lazily, glancing at Yoruchi, who looked significantly more refreshed than before. With a smirk, he offered, "Before you leave, why don't you soak in the hot spring? I don't mind sharing." "Not a chance." Yoruchi waved him off and vanished in a flash. Uehara Shiroa leaned back into the water, chuckling to himself. "Shihoin Yoruchi. You really are an excellent tool." He glanced at his status panel, noting that his Hakuda proficiency had improved to a vice-captain level. This wasn't just a fight, he had used the opportunity to enhance his combat skills. And, incidentally, he had also strengthened his connection with Yoruchi. A perfect outcome. Thinking ahead to tomorrow, he realized he could also train with young Suifoam under the guise of monitoring the Onmitsukido. Uehara Shiroa exhaled deeply, feeling a rare sense of contentment. Life was good. Even this underground base seemed more comfortable than before. And all of it was thanks to Tsunoyoshiro Kamagawa's unfortunate demise. Arigato, Tsunoyoshiro Kamagawa. The next morning. As usual, Uehara Shiroa checked his daily task. Daily task: plant a tree. Today is Arbor Day. Please plant a tree. Protecting the environment is everyone's responsibility. Reward: random attribute points ×2. Without overthinking it, he planted a loquat tree near the captain's office. Hopefully, during the 1,000-year blood war, the tree would still be standing. After dusting off his hands, a familiar notification sounded in his mind. Ding! Congratulations on completing the daily task, plant a tree. Reward received: Shadow Clone +1, Sun Breathing +1. Uehara Shiroa smiled. The stronger he became, the harder it was to improve. But 2 attribute points a day, no matter how small, was still progress. And progress, no matter how slow, was still power. At the 2nd Division Barracks, Uehara Shiroa arrived to find Suifoam, her delicate features locked in an icy expression. To her, the past few days had been hell. First, Yoruchi abandoned her. She had sworn to surpass her former mentor, to make her regret leaving. Yet, within days of taking control of the Onmitsukido, a series of disasters had weakened her authority. It was infuriating. And now, as if fate were mocking her, today's inspector was Uehara Shiroa. Her mood soured instantly. Captain Suifoam, Uehara greeted with an infuriatingly gentle tone. Please accept my condolences. Suifoam's eyes narrowed. What do you mean? No one's died in your family? Why do you look like you're in mourning? He replied casually. Suifoam glared at him, torn between attacking outright or admiring his sheer audacity. Clenching her fists, she gritted out, if I hadn't been busy these past few days, you wouldn't have survived until now. If you dare to meddle with the Onmitsukido again, you won't escape punishment. Uehara simply nodded. You're right. Then, with a smirk, he added, now, why don't you tell me about the Onmitsukido's current state? I'd like to see how long I can keep evading punishment. Suifoam's fingers twitched. A deep breath. A forced exhale. Gritting her teeth, she begrudgingly complied. That wraps up this part of What If Transmigrated in Bleach World. Thanks so much for listening. As always, new parts drop every 4 days, so be sure to stay tuned. Quick reminder. What if Dragon Deck user in Yu-Gi-Oh! Zexal and What If Reborn as a Goku clone will be going on hold soon, since we've nearly caught up with the author. So now, I need your help picking the next project for the channel. I'm currently deciding between these 3 fanfics. What if Gacha system in Modern Family World? What if Fusion Deck user in a different Yu-Gi-Oh! GX? What if transmigrated in One Piece and becoming a Marine? Please vote in the poll and let me know which story you'd like to see next. I'll take the top 2 picks and start working on those 2 series next. Also check out my Patreon channel for early releases of all the series, where you can find all the series released one day ahead of YouTube. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, share it with your friends, and please consider supporting the original author as well. See you in the next one.